Welcome to the show, Sanjay. So good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Really glad to be here.
And I'm so excited that we're already started working together as well
Yep.
and seeing results for our clients. Well, obviously, before we dive into all the gold nuggets that you will share with us, I want to, take back to your earlier childhood, how you got into business so that the audience gets to know a little bit about you more.
Yeah, totally. So really, my parents have always been in business in one form or another. So I've always really been around business. And
Mm.
so I made the decision, early days to go into law commerce degrees back in the old days, long time ago now, unfortunately. So I worked in law for a little while, but really I was probably more interested in business rather than anything else. And my parents had a family business. It was quite small at the time, probably about 8 staff or so, but it was a business school. So we offered degrees just like a university would. And so I went and did that, after working in law firms for a little bit. And it was very small, as I said, only 8 staff, but over time we grew it to over 250 staff or so.
Mm.
And we eventually sold it a handful of years ago to private equity. So private equity, as you may know, is, professional investors that really look to try to increase their money and grow their businesses in the process. So we did that a little while back. And so we've been sitting on the board of that business for a little while now. And so I've always had an interest in business. So I've always done something or other in that space. So I've done some startups, I've invested in some businesses, I've done coaching, consulting in businesses. So I'm just generally in that space at the moment. And as you know, it's a really interesting time to be as part of that space with everything happening with AI and all the
Mm.
business models being turned on its head and things like that. So I'm happy
Yeah.
in that space as you are, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, why do you love business so much? What's your kind of motivation for business?
Well, I think I'm probably a bit of a problem solving sort of mindset type of person, I think. So they're all kind of different, and it's the more you get into it, the more you learn about it. I think there's a bit more of a technical aspect to it, but then there's the people side of it as well, which is a different challenge altogether. And then you layer on top of that all the things that are happening in the world now with AI and stuff, completely changing how everything works. I think it creates all these interesting opportunities for little startups to do well, or even established businesses to add extra things on or acquire other businesses. So it's a very dynamic, interesting landscape, I think, to be part of. So
Mm.
I think I did started off in law, and to be honest, it's a little bit dry if you compare it to this. I think you're on the other side of the fence advising businesses and not kind of doing the fun stuff. You're doing kind of the boring stuff, right? A
Yeah.
lot of the paperwork. So I think that's really because I think I've seen that and probably advising businesses on that side. I think getting your hands dirty in one extent is probably a little bit more interesting to me.
Yeah. So when you were in that family business, what was your role, or what are the many roles that you probably played throughout those years?
Yeah. So as you would know, right, and when you're starting in a small firm, as I said, like we were about 8 staff, you a bit of a jack of all trades. So the main thing that I looked after was sort of more the operations side. So we had our family in there. My parents were both in there. My brother was in there. He was more sales marketing. Typically, it was divided along those lines. So he was more sales marketing, and I was more operations. So the business, in its sense, was basically like a little business, like a little university. But without the university title. So we've got students and you've got academics that are doing teaching, and you've got student support staff, and then you've got people that are doing, sales and marketing, things like. So there's a number of different elements to it. And so that's one of the good things about, I think, starting off in a small business as well, is because you get to try lots of different things. You're very across a lot of different things. Like, for example, when I was working in the law firms, you'd work in some very large law firms, you'd be in a very niche area and you'd be getting really, really good at that, but you wouldn't really understand the broader stuff. And actually, at my time working in law, I'd really liked working in the smaller firm as well, because you got to do lots of different little things. But I
Mm.
mean, look, the interesting thing as well about the journey that we went through is, you can imagine, if you're going through the growth stages that we went through, you make a lot of mistakes, and you get to experience what it's like to have a small team, and then you've got kind of middle management, and then you've got a board, and you've got private equity. So you go through all those learning curves, and that in itself is really interesting as well. So we're really fortunate to go through that process, to be honest.
Yeah. Did you always knew as a family that you wanted to take it to that big size, or was it just an organic growth that over time you're like, oh, what's next? Let's try the next thing.
Yeah. Look, because it was started off by my parents, they were probably just more, my dad in particular was more passionate about the concept of education. I think Indians in particular are quite passionate about education in itself. And it is a good thing to get behind. It's not like you're selling tobacco or alcohol. Not that anything wrong
Yeah.
with those, but you might have some moral quandaries about those things. Whereas
Yeah.
education is quite empowering and lifts people from this level to this level. So they were very, very behind that. And I think education did a lot of good things for them as well in their moving up in the world. So, so that I think was a big driver for them. And, for us, I think there was just opportunities that became more apparent as the business grew. And, I'll talk about business models and stuff a little bit later, but education's a really interesting and good business model in itself. It's not dissimilar to, especially the way that we do it, because it's an online MBA that we provide, amongst a couple of other things. It's very efficient in terms of economics are very efficient. So you can grow it and leverage it out quite well, as opposed to other, maybe bricks and mortar type businesses and things like that. So I think as the opportunities became more apparent, we were like, oh, we better jump on this and really, professionalize it and systemize it so that we can maximize the outcome.
Mm.
Hmm.
If you were just to look back at your whole journey in that business, what were some key changes? For example, at 8, the next change that you felt was around 20 staff
Yep.
or maybe 50 staff. Like, were there any key milestone that you can kind of share if you were to look back?
Yeah. Yeah, look, so when we first started, so you have to remember I was a lawyer joining a commercial organization now, right? So you naturally become, my view is you train to be quite risk averse in being a lawyer. You're always looking for where the problems are. So
Mm,
when I first started, we were very small. I probably had a couple of people that I was looking after. So you kind of had to learn management. So when I was working in the law firms, I was just a technical guy doing stuff, not really managing any other stuff. So you make all the typical management type problems, right? So there was a lot of learning there around, well, there's a number of things actually at that time, but personally around managing staff and culture and, performance management and, hiring right in the first place actually is a very important thing. So we made a lot of mistakes at that front end. If you don't hire right, you feel the pain of that down track. So there's a lot of those types of things that we went through. And then, even stuff like, developing strategy and communicating it to staff. There's all those sorts of learnings that you've got. So that's challenging in terms of you doing stuff through other people, but
mm,
you're basically their manager, right? So that's one level of learning. Then the next level of learning is you've now got managers of people. So
mm.
you can't treat them the same way that you treat your staff, right? Because you can't micromanage this. So you learn all those types of skills, right? And then, you got to hire the right people. So there's classic mistakes that we made where, we would sort of promote the best sales person to become the sales manager. Now, the best salesperson isn't necessarily the best sales manager, right? And then they don't really necessarily have the right skill set. So little mistakes like that. And then in terms of kind of under hiring, we made those sort of mistakes. So I remember we kept hiring at that time. We were quite small. We would hire a bookkeeper, and just change them over, change them over, change them over. And then at one point we thought, okay, we'll just get a guy who's a little bit better, and he was actually quite a lot better, who was a certified accountant to be in that role. And he just unlocked all these things that we didn't, like he was able to do projections for us and also some modeling for us. So sometimes it pays to kind of get a little bit more than what you think you need, because it opens your, you only know what you know, right? Opens your eyes to that sort of stuff. So that was probably the next bit, is like hiring managers and working through them. Then it
Mm.
was probably, we had to professionalize, and it was part of our requirements to have an independent board. So like board reporting, board packs, the financials and stuff that go with that. That was a whole other tier of learning. And then again, one step further is when we brought the private equity guys in, they had another expectation altogether. So how we worked together, and we had to present as CEOs to those guys and to their audience as well. So it was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was lots of different step changes that we went through. And it was almost like restarting again. I mean, obviously you got a foundation, but it was a brand new thing again as you went through those levels. So it was
Yeah. Well, what a privilege for us to talk to someone who's done it all, can see all the can share all those mistakes and tell us what to look forward to.
yeah.
Now, I know you've been investing in businesses, coaching them as well. What would you say the observations are around what makes some business struggle and not succeed, and some as succeed, and those that actually end up failing? What are
Yeah.
the key problems?
So I mean, look, the process that I go through as I work through with people, even think through with them, is I probably think through a few things a little bit chronologically most of the time. So one of the first thoughts is really around understanding their business model, because as you know, some business models are a bit more efficient than others, and some are kind of very constrained by what they can actually ever achieve. So if you think of, let's say, a cafe business, any revenue that they make, about 50% of that already goes to cost of goods sold, right? To make the muffin or the sandwich or the main dish,
Mm.
whatever it is. So it takes a lot of those things to basically pay for the fixed costs and basically make a good living at the end of the day. I think the average profit of a cafe is about 60 grand or so. And yet people keep going into cafes. So you compare that to, say, for example, a SaaS business or a software business. Yes, there might be a big upfront investment to get, to basically build that up. But once you do that, if you've got 100 customers or 500 customers, the cost isn't really massively different to you. The incremental cost of delivery isn't all that much. So really, like if you're sort of starting off looking at a business, the business model, I think, is a really important consideration. So that's one of the early things. The other thing I probably look at in terms of whether a business does well or not so well is really understanding their numbers. And I find that most business owners, whether it's because they go a bit more by gut or whether it's a little bit intimidating to look at the numbers, either way, sometimes there's a bit of reluctance to look at the numbers. But I think once we start to go through numbers and look at some financial modeling, so that's financial numbers, but then also more metrics, KPIs to see how the business is going. I think they start to feel a bit more empowered as well. And you can start to think, oh, well, if we run this scenario, this would happen. If we run that scenario, so there's someone I was working with recently who wanted to start a brand new RTO part to their existing business. And when we looked at, actually, if you add this consultancy part, which makes all this money, and you already had lots of other people that did that, that actually drives all this extra profit to the business. And now he's actually we might actually pivot and do that first as opposed to that RTO, or maybe even abandon the RTO stuff altogether.
Mm.
You don't really know that. And it's very easy if you just run the scenarios. But it's until you sort of get into the habit of going, actually, what do the numbers tell us that you maybe don't do those things? So people can make some bad decisions based off just gut and stuff, which kind of works, to be fair. When you're small, you can afford to do it. But as you get bigger, it's more risky and there's more things that can go wrong. Then really it's about diagnosing the constraints. The constraints might be more on
Mm.
the lead side, sales marketing side, or might be more on the operations delivery side. So that's kind of the process that I go through in terms of working out whether a business is going well, not so well, and what it needs to do to improve.
Yeah. I mean, business is challenging. There's so many moving parts, but I do agree with you. Unless you get your business model right, there's
Yeah,
only so much you can do. You keep selling, but you're going to hit a wall. I
that's
love
right.
that you've also got a quiz that allows you to identify those bottlenecks. So can you tell me more
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, so I've got this, I call it a business health check. And it goes through and kind of each area of business. I think it's got about 26 or so prompts and there are questions in there to ask you, would you rate yourself at this level, or this level for each of those things? And at the end, it spits back kind of a dynamic report based on what you've put in to say, look, you're going well in these areas, but these are areas that you perhaps could improve that might unlock some growth potential in your business. So there's so many different areas and there's little areas within those areas that you can look at that really could help you improve your business. But yeah, some of that is business model related, and some of it is more that constraint stuff that we talked about earlier as well that I find.
Yeah. And,
Mm.
I find that nowadays we get bombarded with lots of information. We can probably,
Yep.
learn this and think we need to apply this. But having a business coach who kind of understand what is it that you're really facing and how do you
Yep.
actually apply it is a difference. What motivated you to create something around, I guess, coaching and accountability?
Yeah.
What did you see in the market that you felt like, hang on, yeah, entrepreneurs struggle with this?
Yeah. Well, I think look, even myself, I just find it's kind of useful to have someone in your corner, kind of just checking in and seeing how you're traveling with various things. I think if you're running things by yourself, I think if you've got a board, and at your kind of that level, it's maybe a little bit different in terms of accountability because there is that regular board reporting that you have to do. But if you're your own boss to a certain extent, or maybe you and your business partner and things like that, I think it's useful to have an independent person checking in to say how are things traveling. I think there's value from the first bit, which is really the strategizing and action planning part of it. And we talked about numbers and metrics. I think there's value in that to make sure that you're going in the right direction, first of all, because that's the first thing that we do. Are they actually going in the right direction to hit their goals? But then after that, if you just kind of leave them alone, they may not really quite push at the same rate. It's a little bit like having a PT. I think we spoke about having
Yes.
a PT and going to the gym. I could go to the gym. Well, do I go to the gym? I probably wouldn't if I didn't have PT, to be honest, right? So just help
Mm.
keep you on track. And you kind of know, I'm spending this money. I really should be making the most out of this. And then even you start to think about other things, I should really be eating right. I should be sleeping right to get the most out of this workout. So I think it's that accountability I just noticed that there's so many business owners out there. First of all, maybe the strategy part they could be doing something better to help them hit their goals, but then ongoing accountability to make sure that they are actually keeping and staying true to course. And I think once people start to develop the habit of it, I think they go, wow, this is actually really quite good. And it's less demotivating and it's more motivating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think, one thing that keeps business owners trapped is that they don't have that accountability. They're just doing what they're doing and
Yeah.
they don't do any better. There's no one else kind of reflecting back and go, hang on, do you know that you can do this or that? What
Yeah.
other reasons do you think that makes business owners trapped? Because most of us want to start a business to have freedom, but
Yes.
sometimes they've been in it for 10 years, 15 years, and they're still stuck in the business. Why
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that?
yeah. No, well, I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind in terms of why business owners might feel a bit trapped. So one is like, I sort of refer to as like a bit of a pendulum effect, right? Especially particularly prevalent in, professional services type business. So the business owner will go out and get the work, do the BD work, do a great job at doing that, bring lots of work in. And then now they've got to do the work. So they step into the delivery side and go and do all the delivery stuff. But at the same time, they maybe aren't doing as much BD or any BD. So that slows down. And then they need to now switch gears and go back to that. So like this is like pendulum swinging from left to right, from BD to sales and marketing. And so you never really feel like you're getting anywhere, and you're kind of like quite trapped and stuck in that work. So that's something I find relatively common. And it's not only just for small businesses, also for bigger businesses. So that's one thing. The other thing that came to mind was probably, sometimes either by design or by default or by accident, business owners kind of make themselves like a bit of a central cog in the machinery that is their business. So, they might be, let's say, the best salesperson. So they have to go and do the sales. Maybe they've got other people not quite as good as them, so they got to do the sales. And if they don't, then maybe the front end of the business sort of slows down. Or on the other side, maybe they're the best technical person, or everything has to be QA'd by them, or they have to double check everything. So they become this kind of choke point, bottleneck, where everything has to go through them in order to get out and get delivered. So, there's those are the kind of the main reasons why I think people start to get trapped and maybe even start to feel that their business is a bit of a burden, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And how much of that do you think is sabotaged by their mindset? Like,
Yeah.
only I can do it, or it's too hard to get someone else to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think it's very personality driven as well, right? Because I think some people are a little bit better at delegating. Like I think if you look at Richard Branson, I think he would attribute a lot of his success to being dyslexic. So he would say that he was actually, he was actually forced to delegate a lot. And so that's why he's got so many different businesses. So I think some people who are actually very, very good, a bit more perfectionist, a bit more, like dot I's, cross T's, they think that and I'm probably a little bit like that, to be honest. Like, like you probably think, oh, look, I'm the best one that can kind of do this. So why don't you be the one? So you'd be surprised. What's the rule? I think the rule is like, if you can delegate it and someone can do it 80% as well as you delegate it. So
Mm.
it's a little bit of a mindset shift to try to get these things off your plate, but it's also a design thing. So you have to look at the business model, and maybe it's kind of inherent in your business model that that pendulum thing is happening. So can you put some other things in place that could prevent that, right? And that's by maybe pivoting your business across to this side here. So yeah, very much mindset, very much sort of by design sort of things. And I think if you're conscious of it and you can start to brainstorm and think about different alternatives, then you have, other things up your sleeve that you can try to get you out of that. Because you don't go into business to feel more trapped than you would be if you were doing a job, right? So you
Mm.
really want to have that flexibility and freedom. That's what you're really trying to work towards. So it's quite unfortunate if you kind of get to that position, but there are definitely ways out.
Yeah, yeah. And
Hmm.
we got talking because I really like your philosophy in life around work-life balance as well.
Yeah.
I know you've got a family and you've ran a business while
Yeah.
having a family. What motivated you to kind of bring that into your coaching to help people to build out their intentional life, not just
Yeah.
freedom in
Yeah.
business?
Well, look, it's very easy, and I've done this, and I'm sure you've done it. Everyone's got trapped by this, whereby you're just driving hard for your business, and it's kind of this finishing line that just keeps kind of moving, right? So you just keep chasing and chasing and chasing. The problem with that is that before you know it, your kids are grown up, and you've just spent all this time chasing this money or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
So I think a big part of this is kind of the intentionality. That's probably the key word that I would have when it comes to kind of life planning or life design. It's being really intentional about how you spend your time and your energy, right? Have you heard of a guy called Jesse Itzler? Have you heard of Jesse Itzler?
Husband of Sarah Blakely,
That's
yes?
right. How would you like to be
Yeah.
known as the husband of someone? Anyway, but he's
Sorry, but she's more
he's
famous.
yeah, she is more famous. You're right. So yeah, you're right. Sarah Blakely, the
I
founder of
love that guy, by the way.
he's great.
completely, yeah, like down to earth and all about living his life with his family. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think he got famous with the David Goggins. He made David Goggins really famous. You know, he's the Navy
Yeah.
SEAL. He lived, so he's a pretty
Yeah.
hardcore guy, but he's got an interesting way of thinking about some of these things. So he'll say something like, you know, if you think about your life, how many more summers do you have with your parents? You know, you might have 10 more summers or 15 more summers. That really helps put things into perspective about how much time you want to spend with your parents. And, you know, there's another stat floating around. I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but it's something like, you know, by the time your kids are 18, you would have spent 90% of the time that you'd ever spent with them. Well, 18, I think. By the time they're 18, you'd spend 90% of the time that you'd ever spend with them. So when you think about things from that perspective, you go, oh, well, it's really important during this period of my life, or as some coaches would refer to the season or chapter, to really focus on these things. And maybe this season or chapter, I'll focus on these things. So we've got some things in place, like, you know, we've got this life plan document where we've got like 10 different categories, and we get people to do a bit of a stock take on how they rank themselves in each of those areas right now. What's going well, what's not going well, and what would you like to change? And then you can sort of map out, you know, relatively fairly exercise on little one pages. This is kind of how you want your life to go. And interestingly, out of that, only 3 of the categories actually relate to business as well. So, you know, you got to put all that into perspective. You know, maybe you want to drive hard with your business at this point, but you got to be aware of this, and you got to communicate this to your partner, or and you know, manage your kids and spend this amount of time with your kids and so. So if you don't do those things, I mean, we've all been guilty of, you know, summer has gone past, or a week has gone past, or a year's gone past. You know, where did that year go? It's very easy for time to fly when you're not being very intentional about it. So yeah, we try to have this process where you're very intentional about how you plan your life, how business fits within that, how you want to drive hard in these areas, and then you can go ahead and map out those things that you want to do to hit those goals that you've got for yourself.
Yeah, I love that because I always believe that, there's no point in making so much money in the
Yeah.
end, and then not have your health,
Yeah.
be divorced and all that. So it's really about how do you achieve your goals in business, but at the same time maintain a happy lifestyle. So I really
Yeah.
like the work that you do. So what is the one-page business plan that they get when they're working with you as well?
Yeah. So first, as I mentioned, we kind of work on this life plan, this one pager. And as I said, 3 of those areas really hit the business side. So then the business plan is more the business focus. And at the top, we get people to outline sort of their vision for their life, which is a summary of the life plan, their vision for their business, and then some big goals that they've got for their business. And then under that sits, you know, the key high leverage actions that's going to get them there. So once you step back, you can just on one page see how it all fits together. You can see how your life fits together, and the two of them sort of talk to each other. And then I'm a fan of using these sort of simple documents because, you know, I've done business plans where it's many, many pages, and, you know, it's just too hard to go through. It just sits in a drawer somewhere. So really out of that, you can then generate what we call like a 3-month action plan or 3-month sprints, where you can sort of see over the next 3 months, what are those actions and how do those break down and fit into that. And then this is what works in with our coaching, because when we speak to people, we go, okay, so this is the week that you're going to focus on this, great. And then we have another document, which is like the metrics KPI dashboard that we refer to. And that gradually gets better and better and more improved. And then so it's a combination of really the action plan and the metrics that we use to help make sure that people are on track and going towards where they need to be going. But it's all kind of
Mhm.
fitting in with the bigger picture that they've got of their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if someone's listening to this and they really like, first of all, the things that you know and the program that you have, like how does it actually work? Like in terms of, the session, maybe when they get the chance to talk to you, what do you actually go through on that first session?
So look,
For the consulting call. Yeah.
yeah, so the first call is very much what we've spoken about. So I just get to speak with the business owner and just get a sense whether or not, well, first of all, whether we gel, whether they like my style, and you know, whether we both get along, right? And but I also just try to understand their business, try to get my head around the business model, just see if there's some opportunities here and there. I generally ask more questions than be speaking about things, to be honest. So just try to get the handle on their business model, try to understand where their numbers are at, if they have numbers. A lot of people don't really know their numbers that great, but try to understand where they think the opportunities are, where they think the constraints are. You know, basically just try to get a handle on how things are. And often by the end of it, we're able to kind of work out, well, actually, if we did this, maybe this could improve and things of that nature. So really, it's more of a feeling out session, both for them and myself, to see whether there's a good fit and whether they think that there's value there that could be given. And then from there, we then start to, in the next sessions, we then start to actually work on these documents. The easiest one is just to start in the life plan. And it's kind of a fun exercise to do a bit of a stock take and work out where you're at. And then naturally it feeds into the one-page business plan, and then the 3 monthly actions, and then the KPIs gradually start to get built out over time. And then with that, people could go, okay, we'll just go off and do it ourselves. but most of the time they've enjoyed the experience and they start to see the value in accountability, that they want to have more regular sessions so that they get that regular feedback, but also that accountability to make sure that they're sticking to what they've said they need to do to get to their goals.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for today's session. I got to
Sure.
know a lot more about the stuff that you know and the program, and I'm going to put all the details in the bottom of the description of this
Right.
video below. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you for helping some of my clients and the people that I brought to
Yeah.
you already. And yeah, if you're interested, check out those links below. And yeah, thank you again, Sanjay.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks very much.